I'm DiDi, and I've worked in coffee for over a decade. I love coffee, and as much as I've learned about coffee in that time, my desire to learn more has only grown. Coffee is a daily, simple pleasure to us, and I love that. But it's also fun to explore the complexities, not only in flavor, but where it comes from, how it's made, and what it says about us. There's still so much to discover. In this show, I'm talking with coffee people in and around my hometown of Atlanta to seek deeper insights, explore the future of the beverage, and find out what makes us tick. This week, we're in Durham, North Carolina, talking about Ethiopian coffee varieties and history with Tim Hill.
Ethiopia has long been considered the birthplace of coffee, but to the extent of its global influence, we haven't had a complete picture. That is, until now. Tim's inquisitive passion for coffee has led to his partnership with Getu Bekele, a respected microagronomist in the region. Over the last few years, their research has culminated in the definitive work on the subject, a reference guide to Ethiopian coffee varieties. As you'll see in our discussion, and from Tim's collection of historical coffee literature, what's old is new again.
Thank you for making me some coffee.
Yeah, no problem.
What do we have here?
So this is Kemwea. It's an estate in Embu in Kenya. And it's one of our best Kenyan lots of the year. And the beautiful thing about it is it's one of like the lower elevation farms. Just a farmer that could really show that dedication to processing practices can make a great quality coffee in areas that you maybe didn't think could produce it.
Cool. So tell me again, what it is exactly that you and Getu are working on.
So I was reading, in this stack of books I have here, I was reading about experiments that they were doing in like the 1930s in Kenya. And, those experiments are basically the exact same things that we're doing today and just thinking that like we discovered them in coffee. And, that's, it's like there is a discovery process that happens and you learn at your own rate. But, it was this moment where I was like, oh, everything that we do, kind of like everything old is new again. And, can we learn from past resources, past experiments, like not think that we're always reinventing the wheel again and again and again. Like, can we draw upon those conclusions? Is there things that we can look at to make them better, like test it in a different way? So this is a book from Scott Laboratories in the 1930s that, is basically, it's a pretty thick book, talking a couple hundred pages, and it's basically just coffee research that happened in the 1930s by this one organization, in collaboration with a few others. But, just really beautiful stories about how to grow coffee, what they're treating in different control plots, different varieties that they're testing out. Got these maps that are, based on annual rainfall that you can kind of overlay over other maps in this book to kind of give a geographical representation of that. You can kind of go through and see everything that they were testing at this time and what it was. So a lot of varieties from India, obviously relation to kind of the British colonialism of East Africa, Kenya in particular, and India. But you can get into a lot of this stuff. The most interesting to me is that they're talking about geisha. Back in the 1930s. It was like this book was published the very first year that they had it. So it's geisha from West Abyssinia has been planted in nurseries. Germination is proving most satisfactory. That's literally the only thing it says. But talking about Kent's different selections, Blue Mountain, Harar, another Ethiopian coffee in Kenya being tested. So that's really cool. And then you have like 20 years later, you have this researcher who basically, kind of knew that they were selecting all these different varieties, and they were, doing all of this categorization and research. And he actually wrote basically definitions for all of the varieties that were being grown at the time in like an updated version of the research and testing. And again, you have, varieties like Philo and Geisha, Harar shows up again. You have all the SL selections from Kenya that they were testing and using. So it's not just SL28, which we all know, or SL34. You got SL1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 10, 14. All these different selections and what they were, where they came from, who selected them. So from here, a lot of this information, you get into, all right, so how do you organize all these varieties? Because it's super complex. Of all these connections, which looks like basically a giant mess. And then from this, you get to something that's like a little bit more clear, but not entirely. So you take, all these research institutions that are doing selection process of breeding coffees, all the connections that they have, all the things that they're breeding together. So from like a simple drawing like this over here, try to get a little bit more clear and defined in terms of what that looks like. All the different Ethiopian varieties, which you can kind of break down into two separate sections. So varieties by researchers that are output by the research institution, and then you have these regional types. But these are all like all the things that we could come up with good information for, good definitions. My hope is that a lot of this reference material that we're trying to create, and it's more about how I think the coffee industry communicates in general, is I feel like there are different pieces and everything's a little bit siloed right now. So you have researchers really doing all this amazing work that coffee buyers, coffee professionals, and certainly coffee drinkers have like no access to, or no real access to. They're not being presented in a way that's digestible, that's, can be, can be just digested in a very easy fashion. And, then, how do you bridge all those things together? Like, how do you create a platform and just an exchange between everyone working to hopefully have that information, realized in a different way, so that people are a little bit more thoughtful, people have more information, people don't go into things with misconceived notions of that idea, or just, factually totally incorrect. So, that's certainly my, a little bit of my background in this, is that a lot of the information I had as a coffee professional was totally wrong. It was like, at best, like, was naive, at worst was just like harmful, like not actually good information to be working from.
For example, what kind of facts were you fed as a young coffee child?
Oh man. I mean, you could go like to totally ridiculous aspects, like when I was working, at very early in coffee, working at like Starbucks, someone once told me that the blueberry flavor associated in Harar literally came from blueberries that were planted next to the coffee trees.
Sure.
That one I think goes down as like one of the best factoids I held on to for a while, where when I learned, I was like, oh, not even close. It really caused me to question certain things. But, contrary to that, I think other ideas of, specifically, I'll use Varieties as a good platform. If you look at like Variety Colombia in Colombia, or you look at Rebrew 11, these two, kind of famous varieties in Kenya and Colombia, there's a lot of coffee professionals that are like, oh, they just taste bad. And when I started tasting through those, like, there's certain ones that I didn't appreciate, I didn't like for certain reasons, but they're also really great representations of those coffees that tasted really good. And so this idea of, these preconceived notions that people go into a situation with based on information that's maybe, based on 1, 2, 3 experiences, that's not really a good foundation or bedrock for, I think someone to draw a conclusive opinion on. So it's really got me in this, I don't know, spot where I want to navigate situations a little bit more consciously and a little bit more thoughtfully before I start drawing these hard line, decisions on like, oh, variety Colombia is bad, Reaver 11 is bad, it's never going to taste as good as SL. Like maybe that's true. I personally don't know, but I also don't have enough information to really base that conclusion on.
Sounds like you've grown up a little bit. I mean,
a little bit, not a lot.
I feel like it's not so much like myth busting that you're doing, but more like broadening the scope under which you perceive a lot or experience a lot of these coffees.
Yeah, no, it's trying to take in more information. At least at its baseline, it's trying to listen more, talk less.
I feel like I had heard some information at some point that some of those varieties would be exported at some point to other areas that are in need. Or do you think that the individual countries are trying to just take care of their own issues and there's not some, is there a dialogue going on?
Ethiopia is unique in that I feel like they have the impression that they've been burned by kind of coffee research over the last kind of, I don't know, maybe century. In Ethiopia, you have all these varieties that have, kind of become famous or are currently in breeding programs to make other countries' coffees better tasting, more disease resistant. They're using the genetic material that originally came out of Ethiopia.
And then they're like, what about it?
Heavily, yeah. And then in Ethiopia, it's like the one country that you don't really associate like geisha or like these different things to. It's like, it's Ethiopia. One of my things from a coffee buyer is I want to promote and have amazing single variety coffees from Ethiopia. Currently, I'm not sure that's really possible because, Ethiopia is really protective of their seed material and they want to make sure that people aren't taking it and using it for these, these different projects that they're not aware of or, that could, inadvertently affect, their resources, so anyway, that's kind of an interesting dynamic in terms of like Ethiopia being this, birthplace center of genetic diversity in coffee. And then like, how does that work with the rest of the world? And how does Ethiopia get the benefit of having that, but also protect it?
So you are a student of coffee. Like I know that you are Mr. Quality Controller, Green Buyer, or whatever you want to call this title, but you are a forever student. And I can relate to that and wanting to pour over any information that you can get your hands on. Mm-hmm. And I think that we've kind of grown up in this industry with mentors, almost as if we were apprentices in this industry. What's your perspective on that? And do you think that will change over time? Looking back at my particular history, it's, again, it's this notion of, wanting this really collaborative effort between people that, have a more apprenticeship style learning in coffee. And then, what it seems like is turning into, potential field that people can go to school for and learn more in a, methodic, like catered manner. But I also don't want to dismiss this idea of what it means to really be in a situation, to learn from experience as opposed to learn from a book. It's funny, I'm talking in front of all these old books that I'm learning from, saying that, what does it really mean to learn from a book? But I hope that in coffee, we find a really good division and a really good collaborative process of apprenticeship and, like an academic, very school background on coffee, because, we certainly lack a lot of expertise and a lot of science in what we do, and that's part of like misinformation that happens in coffee. But we also, it's an industry that's full of really amazing artists, really amazing musicians, really amazing like this collective of people that are creative and want to do really good things. And I don't want to dismiss that as something that was wrong or like that isn't the right approach. So I hope that blend can happen. It feels like not that this is the answer, but it feels like it's healthy to encourage people just to always ask questions. You know, you have all this material in front of you. You can dive into it as much as you want. You can apply it, but then, you know, bounce ideas off of the person next to you. You know, allow for that, like, that human interaction to be that creative spark that makes the new thing come from the material you just laid out in front of you. Because it's not like you're looking in these books and being like, oh, this is what I have to do now. You're taking that and applying it to a current situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, it's, it could be really easy to just walk into a classroom and think, like, by showing up every day that you will be a master by the end of 6 years.
Yeah.
But it is this, like, you still have to have that interactive process, like that, call it apprenticeship or just, you know, downright friendship.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it really applies to, I think go to coffee tasting. I still consider myself, I've been tasting coffee, every day pretty much for over a decade. And today I would say I'm a good coffee taster. I think I still have a ways to go to be what I would consider myself to be an excellent coffee taster. I feel like I'm maybe 50-60% of the way there, where every time I taste something, I can give a really good answer as to what that flavor is and why. But I want to continue to get better and better. I
would hope that you never get there. Like, that you continue to try to improve.
Yeah.
You know, because then it's boring.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, and there really is no end. And so, the idea of relentlessly pursuing something and being like, feeling like you're just making progress every day in a certain category and that there's no end to that and being okay, it's a good place to be.
They grow coffee here. Not much, less than 1% of the world's coffee. But the coffee beans they do grow are first class. So Hills Brothers comes here. Because when they blend these beans with the beans from up to 50 other countries, you get a coffee that's more than first class. It's world class.
Hills Brothers, it's world-class coffee.
Every time I hang out with Tim, I learn so much about coffee. Be sure to check out Tim and Getu's book on Ethiopian coffee varieties. See y'all next time. I love you. Bye-bye.